Welcome back, friends. Welcome back in another video tutorial for microbiology with technique. So in that video tutorial we are going to discuss about another mode of action lecture video, that is tetanus toxin. Okay, so here we are going to discuss about the mode of action of tetanus toxin. So tetanus disease, also called lockjaw condition, is a medical condition associated with or characterized by prolonged contraction of muscle fibers. Okay, so the primary symptoms of tetanus toxin include the primary symptoms of tetanus toxins, right? So include, and it is characterized by tetanoplasmin. It is a neurotoxin that is secreted by gram positive obligate anaerobe bacteria and spore former, mainly Clostridium tetani. So what are the infectious cycle? Let's discuss about the infectious cycle. Okay, so the first step of infection cycle is organism will enter through large, small, or even unrecognized wound. Deep infected puncture are most susceptible. Okay, since organisms are best anaerobically, or since organisms thrive best anaerobically. Okay, so that means organism will more likely to cause the infection when there is a deep infected punctures in the body, right? So now the toxin will produce locally and transported via bloodstream or by along the nerves to central nervous system. The initial symptoms are spasm of jaw, facial and neck muscles are observed, and dysphagia are often the early symptoms of variable incubation period. Okay, so after the production of toxin locally, it will migrate through the bloodstream to along the nervous system to the central nervous system, right? Now spasm of jaw, facial or nervous or neck muscles are the primary symptoms of the tetanus after variable incubation period. Motor neuron of both the skeletal bone motor neuron of both the spinal cord and brainstem are hyperactive, right? Because the toxin specifically inhibit the inhibitory range cell, and the complete tetanic spasm occur in advanced cases that include patient with rigid in or moderate opisthotonus with arms extended, abdomen board-like, and respiratory arrest may occur. Okay, so the tetanus toxins infection cycle is something like that organism will first enter via large, small, or even unrecognized wound. Deep infected punctures are more preferable for their entrance. Okay, now toxins will produce locally and passes via bloodstream or along the nerve to central nervous system. Then the initial symptoms will be spasm of jaw, facial and neck muscles, and dysphagia are often early symptoms. Motor neuron of both the spinal cord and brainstem become hyperactive because, remember, toxin specifically and initially inhibit inhibitory cells, that is brain cells, and at last complete tetanic spasm may result with in such cases patient will exhibit moderate opisthotonus, that is a rigid condition with arms extended, abdomen board like, and respiratory arrest may occur in some cases. So that is the normal tetanus infection cycle that you need to remember. Now we are going to discuss about how tetanus toxin works. Before going to start our discussion, I want to tell you that the mode of action of tetanus, or more specifically the consequence of tetanus toxin, is exactly reverse of the botulinum toxin. Okay, if you can remember that we have discussed that via neuromuscular junction the muscular contraction going on, right? as a response of certain stimuli, right? So this muscular contraction is due to release of acetylcholine neurotransmitter, okay, that is transferred to the muscles and accepted by via receptor present in the muscle membrane, right? So there is a protein, I think you can remember, SNAP25. This SNAP25 was inhibited by botulinum toxin, and as a result the muscle cannot contract further, right, and causes a type of paralysis. That was the mode of action in case of botulinum toxin, and in case of tetanus toxin the funda is exactly the alternate, okay. So here the tetanus toxin will inhibit synaptobreviin, okay. So by and as a inhibition of synaptobreviin, and more specifically the inhibitory cells that are Renshaw cells, they inhibit the release of inhibitory neurotransmitter. Those inhibitory neurotransmitter are GABA and glycine, okay. So what are the function of those GABA and glycine? GABA and glycine simply stops the muscle contraction in time, so that there will be no overactivity of the muscles, okay, for any kind of smallest stimulation, okay. So there is a regulation, right? So neurotransmitter acetylcholine facilitates the contraction, and GABA and glycine stops the contraction in time, right? So these GABA and glycines release is inhibited by the tetanus toxin, and as a result the muscle remain contracted for a prolonged period of time. That is the main mode of action funda of tetanus toxin. Now let's start our discussion. Okay, so as I have told you that in case of tetanus toxin it is again a AB type toxin, okay. So the total length of the peptide or total molecular weight of the peptide is 150 kilodalton, okay, and among them the A subunit is again here smallest one, and it is of 50 kilodalton, and B subunit is of 100 kilodalton, okay. So B subunit here also involved in binding, and here the receptor is dicyanoganglioside, okay, also known as GD2 and GD1B on the neuron membrane, okay. So suppose this is the neuron membrane and there is a receptor dicyanoganglioside, so our B chain will bind over here, okay. So after that, as we have seen in case of our botulinum toxin or any kind of AB toxin, they will enter inside the cell via receptor mediated endocytosis and become covered with a vesicle, right? So here it is also the same case, okay. And zinc peptidase, because remember here the A subunit and B subunit are also joined by disulfide bond, okay. So zinc peptidase will attack the vesicle associated membrane protein and facilitate the release of A subunit from B subunit, okay. Then the action of A chain starts. The action of A chain involved degradation of the synaptobreviin, and as a result the affected neuron cannot secrete inhibitory neurotransmitters such as GABA and glycine, okay. So as a result dangerous overactivity of the muscle from the smallest stimulus can result, and the failure of inhibition of motor reflexes by sensory stimulation, okay. So the idea is here the peptide is the titanoplasmin whose molecular weight is 150 kilodalton, and among them A chain's molecular weight is 50 kilodalton. It is again smallest subunit, and B subunit is 100 kilodalton, and it is largest subunit. B subunit bind with dicyanoganglioside GD2 and GD1B receptor, and after that binding the A chain zinc peptidase will attack the vascular associated membrane protein, and after that the action of A chain stops the affected neuron from releasing glycine and GABA by simply inhibiting the synaptobreviin, and as a result overactivity of the muscle from smallest stimulation take place. and as a result this cause generalized agonist and antagonist musculature termed as endotox spasm. Okay, so here the mode of action is exactly the opposite of our botulinum toxin, right? In case of tetanus, the toxin name is tetanoplasmin. So tetanoplasmin is a neurotoxin, exotoxin, AB type toxin, right? So it is secreted by gram positive anaerobic obligate anaerobic spore forming bacteria. Okay, so this tetanoplasmin is of 150 kilodalton weight, and among them A subunit is of 50 kilodalton and it is smallest subunit, and B subunit is of 100 kilodalton and it is largest subunit. Okay, the B chain binds to the dicyanoganglioside. Okay, also commonly known as GD2 or GD1B. Okay, on the neuron membrane. The A chain is zinc peptidase attack the vascular associated membrane protein. After the release of A chain from B chain, the A chain will stop the release of inhibitory neurotransmitter from the affected neuron by simply what? Cleaving synaptobravin, and as a consequence the muscle shows superactivity or overactivity from the smallest stimulus. Okay, that means failure of inhibition of muscle of motor reflexes by sensory stimulation. This causes the generalized contraction of the agonist and antagonist musculature termed as endotox spasm. That is the overall idea about the tetanus toxin. Okay, so today we have learnt about the tetanus toxin. So tetanus is also called lockjaw, is a medical condition characterized by prolonged contraction of the skeletal muscle fiber. The primary symptoms is caused by tetanoplasmin, which is a neurotoxin which is secreted by obligate anaerobic gram positive spore forming Clostridium tetani. Then we have learnt about the infection cycles, right? So here the infection cycle, first step is organism will enter via what? Organism will enter via large, small or even unrecognizable wound. Deep puncture or deep infected puncture are often more susceptible, as don't forget that they are obligate anaerobe, right? So toxins will produce initially, right, and or locally, then that toxin will be transferred by bloodstream or along the neuron via central nervous system. Okay, after that transportation the primary symptoms will be spasm of jaw, facial and neck muscles and dysphagia. They are the early symptoms after the several incubation period. After that, motor neuron of both the okay, so after that the motor neuron of both the skeletal both the spinal cord and brainstem become hyperactive as a result of inhibition of inhibitory cell Renshaw cell by the toxins, right? And then the most worst condition, that is complete tetanic spasm, occurs where patient become rigid with moderate opisthotonus, a condition where the person hold their body abnormally with abdomen board like, with extended arm, and respiratory arrest may occur in some cases. Okay, so that are the symptoms that you can write. Now we have learned about the mode of action, right? So tetanus toxin is a neurotoxin and it is a AB type toxin. So it is again consists of two kind of subunit. One is A subunit whose molecular weight is 50 kilodalton and B subunit whose molecular weight is 100 kilodalton, and this tetanus toxin bind to the dicyanoganglioside on the neuron membrane. Okay, after that binding it become internalized and a zinc peptidase which attacks the vascular associated membrane protein. Okay, after that the A chain will attack the muscles and attack the neurons and stops the release of inhibitory neurotransmitters such as glycine and GABA by simply inhibiting or by simply degrading the synaptobravin. Okay, so as a result, the muscle become hyperactive or overactivity is showed by the muscle from the smallest stimulation. That means the inhibition of, so that means a kind of paralysis condition occurs. Okay, that is commonly known as antagonistic or contraction of the antagonistic and agonistic musculature called endotoxspasm. Okay, as you can see. Okay, so the paralysis in case of tetanus is exactly the opposite paralysis caused by botulinum toxin, that you need to remember. Okay, tetanus toxin causes failure of inhibition of motor reflexes by sensory stimulation, and where in case of botulinum toxin, after the completion of the action, it prevent further contraction of the muscle, right? One prevent contraction and one sustains contraction. That is the difference between botulinum toxins a mode of action and tetanus toxin mode of action. So I hope that this video will be helpful to you, and thank you for listening to this class.